Okay, recording has started, and welcome everyone to a basic overview of document accessibility. And I want to try and cover all the basics, so that means I'm going to try and fly through a lot of content today. I'll try and keep my voice paced slowly, but there is a lot to cover. If you do have any questions during the training, if you would just type them in the chat and I'll answer them after we're through. And then you can all read the answers at your leisure, but I want to try and fit everything into an hour if possible. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking time out of your day. And I have also turned on remote captions. If you would like to see auto-generated captions for this training, here is a screenshot that shows you to click on the three dots on our meeting in Teams. So click on Teams and click on those three dots, also known as the options menu, and then select turn on live captions, and they'll appear below, kind of where below all the pictures of everyone who's attending today. After the meeting, we're going to clean up the captions and get them perfected by our wonderful captioning unit, and I will send out the recording with those amended, fixed captions, and along with some additional resources for everyone. So the goals for today's training are to first talk about what needs to be made accessible and why. And I know a lot of people who work at CIDI already know this, but some people might be new, and some people also might not have spent the last several years of their life focused specifically on document accessibility. And so there are a lot of things that occur to me that might not occur to everyone else. So I want to kind of share that knowledge with the whole team to make us stronger, because hopefully we are making the path for others easier, and we are demonstrating how to be accessible and talking the talk, but also walking the walk. Next, we'll talk about how to write alternative text description for images, and that is a huge factor, a huge key piece of accessibility, is describing images for people. Then we will talk about the top 3 factors of document accessibility. So across all programs, what I think are the top 3 takeaways from today's training that I want you all to have. Then we will talk about how to use the wonderful built-in accessibility checkers and tools that are built into Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Adobe Acrobat, all those different programs. Those automatic tools can help you check your work and keep you honest and make sure that you've caught everything in terms of accessibility. And then last, we'll turn to social media and email campaigns, things that we don't often think about in terms of accessibility. But as a company, we want to make sure that we're following best practice, especially with all of those social media platforms that have a direct connection to our members. So to talk a little bit about document accessibility and why it matters, before I even get started, I want to define my term. So people use accessibility in a lot of different ways, and I have given trainings before and gotten to the very end and realized we're not on the same page. So a lot of people conversationally used accessibility to talk about, can I understand it, right? Can I access this journal article? Is this Westworld show inaccessible? Is it too difficult for me to understand? Physical accessibility is something that the Tools for Life team, the research people here at CIDI, a lot of us work on physical accessibility. How can I have an accessible experience with voting? How can I access the building? Do I need my buzz card? But today, for document accessibility, I am going to be talking about can someone using a screen reader navigate a document? Can they hear image description? Does the document have accessible headings? Someone who might be using a keyboard to navigate through the document. Is the text highlightable so that the screen reader can pronounce it out loud for someone? So when we're talking about accessibility today, it's in terms of digital accessibility. And does it meet those accessibility guidelines, those 508 guidelines? This is a screenshot of Harley's story, which is a wonderful YouTube video that Raminta has created for us. And I don't really have time to click on it and show it to you all today, but I'm going to be sending out this slide deck later with the link that can take you to this story. If you're interested in exploring some of our YouTube video content, feel free to look around for it. Harley's story is a great, it offers a wonderful opportunity for people to see a student who is using a screen reader and how they navigate through a PDF. He uses the screen reading functions to highlight text, highlight a paragraph at a time. He can copy and paste text from a textbook into a Microsoft Word doc to take notes and create his own study guides. He can use bookmarks within the PDF. And he is also an excellent example of a sighted user who relies on accessible technology. Because when you first start talking to people about e-text and digital accessibility, I think the automatic assumption is that you are creating something primarily for a blind student or a student who has low vision and needs to magnify the page. And yes, that is a huge audience for digital text, but a lot of sighted students use e-text as well. So in terms of what needs to be accessible, normally when I give this training, it's all about textbooks and course materials and syllabi, but for CIDI, I think everything needs to be accessible since we're an accessibility company and we bill ourselves as the experts. So that would include grant proposals, research findings, annual reports, social media posts, marketing email campaigns, emails that we ourselves write or forward within the company or to others and members. And then, of course, our PowerPoint presentations. And we'll go through some of these one by one later in the training. In terms of who uses accessible media, like I was saying, a large population, I would say about 10% of our e-text orders each year are from students who are blind or low vision, but the majority, 90%, are all of these other categories of people, individuals who rely on assistive technology to access their documents. So students who have mobility issues, who cannot hold a textbook, students who have motor disabilities, who can't turn pages easily, the deaf and hard of hearing community, students with learning disabilities such as dyslexia or ADHD, students who have cognitive disabilities or have suffered head injuries or trauma. They might benefit from having that additional auditory piece. Auditory learners often prefer it. And of course, the aging population, they like to have text that they can modify or magnify. Also, I forgot to mention students who have color blindness are also in that mix because they can change the color of the text or the background or change the color contrast on the screen. Or some people have adaptive tools that they put over their computer monitor that helps them change the color contrast or provide glare, less glare, preferably. And so there are all kinds of people who make up this audience. So jumping into writing alternative text, I first want to tell you what not to do, and that is not to rely on the auto-generated alt text that Microsoft Office has rolled out with its latest updates. So if you haven't yet gotten a chance, I would definitely recommend right after this training, or if you want to do it now during the training, open up Microsoft Word and open up Microsoft PowerPoint, and in both of those programs, turn off the auto-generated alt text. And in order to do that, you would click on File, then click on Options, select Ease of Access on the left, and then scroll down to Automatically Generate Alt Text for Me. It's kind of hidden away. They squirreled it away. The reason you want to turn it off is because this is an example of a screenshot of a bar graph, and it's quite a complex bar graph. It's measuring a lot of things in each bar. It's projected international population to 2030. And the auto-generated alt text for this was a screenshot of a cell phone, which I think we can all agree is terrible and not accurate. And it oddly chooses that exact same description for a lot of things. So whenever it doesn't know what it's looking at, everything is a screenshot of a cell phone. And I don't even know what a screenshot of a cell phone would look like if it were real. So it's not great. Hopefully it will be great in the future, and everyone will have wonderful auto-generated alt text, but for now, in its infancy, I would say go ahead and turn that off and make sure you're writing your own alt text description. The other reason why you want to make sure that you're turning it off is that if you leave it on, you will not catch images that you failed to describe when you use the accessibility check at the end. So I've seen some documents and PowerPoints go out with auto-generated alt text that wasn't that awesome. And I know that these people are really great and on the ball and usually know how to use the accessibility checker. But if you have this by default, it's turned on. If you don't go in and turn it off, you could miss some of those images you need to describe. So that's the first. Go ahead and turn that off so that you could generate alt text on your own. So in order to describe an image, and I always start with my potentially favorite image of all time. This is a cat named Tombali. She is from Istanbul or Constantinople, depending on your time frame. And I just love this image. People that I've given trainings to have told me all about this meme and this cat. And if you can't see, it is a very, very large cat, and it is in a cityscape. So the first thing you want to do when you are writing your alt text is summarize what you see in one general informative sentence. So that sounds very easy, but time and again I've given this training, and what I see happen is people start describing around the cat, right? They want to talk about the boats and the water and the spires in the background. Maybe they go in, maybe they're an architect and they have a lot to say about domed buildings, or they want to focus their marketing skills. They want to talk about the billboards in front, or they want to take a cruise, so they talk about the cruise ship parked at his feet. And then eventually 5 or 6 or 7 paragraphs in, they get to the cat. I've also seen people fail to mention the size of the cat, right? By the time they talk about the cat, or even if they foreground the cat and talk about the cat right away, they might just say a large cat, which to someone who can't see this image, I think would be an understatement. So the goal is to try and sit back for a second, look at the photo and think, what is the takeaway? And you want to foreground that information in your first sentence if possible, because depending on the person who is listening with screen readers, they might have their settings set on brief, and it might not listen for more than so many characters. I think in JAWS it cuts off after 250 characters unless someone goes in and adjusts that so they hear more verbose description. So in that first sentence, you want to cover everything. You also want to make sure that you cover everything in that first sentence, because if you spend 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 sentences getting to the cat, the person who is listening is just they're spinning their wheels trying to paint this picture in their mind's eye. And you really want to give them that important information up front so that they have it, they have the general overview of the picture, and then they can build a framework from there. Then work from general and then fill in details as needed. So when people ask me for an image like this, I would say 1 to 2 sentences would be a great length for your alt text. You don't really need more than that, unless depending on context. Maybe it's a class on memes and you really need more and you want people to know more about the image. But I would say about the length of a tweet is how long you would want to spend on this image. And you want to use proper grammar, spelling, and punctuation. Avoid acronyms and symbols whenever possible so that the screen reader is going to pronounce everything in predictable ways. And you want to keep your description neutral and informative. So while I might know the name of this cat and I might want to squeeze its belly and pet its big white fluffiness, I am going to leave that out. So my alt text description for this would be an enormous cat lounging on top of a building in a city by the water. Now, I could add more details to that if I needed to, or depending on my audience, but I want to just keep things neutral if possible and remain objective. Just describe what I see. Another reason I like to use this example in trainings is that I have given this training in person before, or trained people on writing alt text before and used this same image, same resolution and quality, and people in the back of the room couldn't see the cat. They thought that it was a building fire and that the 2 back paws were buildings that were burning and her whole body was just smoke clouds. So I like to use this to remind people that even if you are presenting images to sighted individuals, you want to describe your images even verbally whenever possible. So I have some examples of simple images. When you have a portrait or a photo of a person, you can just put their name. Again, especially considering what's going on now in the world and in our country and in our city, it's hard not to want to say a few things about Martin Luther King's legacy and what he might be thinking and the sadness in his soul and the pensive look that he is giving. But to keep things neutral and short and sweet and concise for the person listening, I would just put his name, Martin Luther King Jr. On the right, I have a simple graphic of the alt text that I would write for this would be a magnified image of the human coronavirus. And then depending on my audience or my context, if it's in a biology class or if it's someone studying immunology, you might need to add more information about the structure, the projecting glycoproteins, which I looked up. I don't just know that off the top of my head. Depending on how I'm using the image and who is viewing it, I could add more details as needed. Here's an example of a very common image that we have in a lot of our reports at CIDI or that we see in textbooks all the time. So this is a simple bar graph. And the approach to writing alt text for a bar graph is the same as any alt text approach. You work from general to specific, and you begin by naming what type of image it is. So I would say this is a bar graph, and the title is US population by race. Next, I would describe what's on the horizontal and vertical axis, population and year, and then I would name the years or the range. And then finally, once I did that, I would describe either the trend of the data if I'm keeping things short, or I would go methodically through each year and provide the breakdown in parallel structure, a very organized way for each bar so that it's very easy for someone to comprehend. In my description blue, my sample description, I have a bar graph titled U.S. Population by Race that compares the percentages of Black, Hispanic, White, and other races in the United States for the years 1990, 2000, projected 2025, and projected 2050. In 1990, there were 76% white, 9% Hispanic, 12% Black, and 3% other. In 2000, there were ... So if I were to continue describing that full data set, I would try and do it the exact same way for each year. If you want to keep things brief, you could just describe the trend of the data just in one general sentence about how the shift of minority versus majority, the shifting, you know, they're all reducing, these are expanding, that sort of thing. Or you could keep your alt text very brief and then provide the data of the table, or sorry, the data of the bar graph in a table that accompanies the bar graph. That way someone could access that data and tab through the table and hear that data piece by piece if they wanted to. So offering data in multiple modalities is something that I often recommend to people who are creating their own documents because it gives people that data in multiple ways. If someone were to listen to the long extended alt text of this graph, there's no way for them to kind of reverse it and go back. And what was that data point again? Wait, how many Hispanic in 1990? They have to listen to the whole thing as a piece all over again. So providing data in table form when you have that ability is a great accessible way to provide data in multiple modalities. So physically, how do you add alt text to your images? If you are in Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint, you are going to right-click on the image, and depending on whether you have the update or not, there are two different ways that you can add alt text. They've made it simple with the update, and you can right-click on the image, and right there in the right-hand menu, it gives you the option to edit alt text. In older versions of Microsoft Word, and we're talking maybe 2 or 3 months ago, so it's a very recent update, you will get the option to right-click on the image, and then this screenshot shows you will choose Format Picture, which is the third icon in the screenshot. It's dark blue with crosshairs, a square with crosshairs. You'll click on the Format Picture, select the Layout Properties icon. Sorry, the Layout Properties is this square. And then you will type your description in the description field. You never want to type in the title field because some screen readers will only read the title field by default and skip the longer description if the student or the individual has their settings on brief alt text. So we tell everyone best practice is just to put the description only in the description field. You also want to avoid using any hard line breaks. So don't hit enter, enter, and create a new paragraph within your alt text. Everything should be one paragraph. If you hit enter, sometimes JAWS will skip ahead and not read anything beyond that hard line break. In order to add alt text in a PDF file, so if you are creating your own PDF from a Microsoft Word doc, You can save that Microsoft Word doc, and if you've added alt text, it will then also appear in the PDF. But say you inherit a PDF or someone creates a PDF without adding alt text to begin with, in Adobe Acrobat, you can go to the accessibility tools and you will select the reading order tool, and it will highlight all of your content on the PDF page as you see in the screenshot, and it numbers it according to reading order. For all of the figures or images in your PDF, it's going to create a big X over it, and you can see in this screenshot it says figure, no alternate text exists. So I could then, from the reading order view, I can right click on this image and it will give me the option to edit alt text. And that's how I can do that. An alternate way for adding alt text, if you don't want to go through your document and right click on all of them, you can also use the accessibility checker in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or in Adobe Acrobat. You could run an accessibility report, and in all three instances for a Word doc or a PDF or a PowerPoint, from the accessibility report, it will list all of the images that are lacking alt text, and you can click on them one by one and add your alt text there. So that's another option. And another reason why you want to make sure you turn off that auto-generating default. So we've talked about how to add alt text. We've talked about why accessibility matters, and we've talked about something else. Adding alt text, how to physically add alt text in your images. So now I want to move on to the top 3 factors across all documents, and this is a little bit more general, and then I'll get into more specifics about specific programs and accessibility, and then we'll talk about social media and accessibility. So if I were to narrow things down and say, what are the 3 takeaways from today's training? What do I want everyone to learn about accessibility in documents and eText? The first would be image description, which we covered, so yay, check. Have I written alt text descriptions and or captions for my images? The second really key factor to accessibility would be, is my content easy to navigate? So someone who is accessing a text with a screen reading program or software, they are using their keyboard for navigation. They're generally not using their mouse. If they are using their mouse, it's with a combination of different shortcuts. So you want to make sure that you have styled headings and bookmarks so that someone can navigate easily throughout your document. And I'll go over how to do that. And then finally, you want to be sure that you're making accessible design choices. And design covers a lot. And I have some additional resources that I can send to people if they're interested. But basically, you want to think about your fonts, your colors, your backgrounds, the general appearance of everything, color and style. If you were to think like a graphic artist or a graphic designer, are your design choices accessible? So are you using fonts that are easy to read, backgrounds and fonts that have a high color contrast from one another? Am I inserting crazy busy PowerPoint backgrounds that make it really hard for someone to pay attention to the text? And so these are the 3 things you want to step back and think about when you're creating a document. In order to add headings for navigation in Microsoft Word, you can go to the Home ribbon, and you'll see there are heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, all kinds of styles that you could apply to text in your document. So before I started working here, I was an instructor and I made a lot of handouts on poetry and literature. And I would style everything, but I would just make it bold and centered, or I would choose a really cool font to make things look cool. And I thought that meant that I was organizing the material. And I was, but I wasn't making it accessible. So someone using a screen reader, the screen reader might pronounce the heading differently because it's bold or centered or something, but it wouldn't identify it as a heading. And it wouldn't help me create a organizational hierarchy for my document. So these headings allow you to do that. So someone using a screen reader, if someone's using JAWS and they're listening to, say, a textbook, if it's been made accessibly, if it's a accessible Word doc version of a textbook, a JAWS user can just hit Insert F6 and it will pull up all of the headings in the document, and they can scroll through it with the arrow key, and they can jump to chapter 6, chapter 7, go to the index, figure out where this is, jump around in the document very easily without having to scroll or even see the document. So in order to add a heading, you can highlight a word or a line in your document, select the heading level in the Styles group on the home ribbon, and then to view all the headings within your document, click on the View tab, and then put a little check mark in the navigation pane box, and it will open up a navigation pane on the left-hand side of your Word document and show you all your headings. And then you can edit them or add more, and it's a very helpful organizational feature. In Adobe, they don't call them headings, they call them bookmarks, but it's very easy to add them. Anywhere in your PDF, you can highlight text, or you can even highlight space on the page, and you press Control B and it will create a bookmark for you. The thing that's neat about bookmarks as opposed to headings is a bookmark you can rename it anything you want or edit it. The heading has to match what the text reads in the document itself. But in Adobe, in the PDF, you could make your bookmark, you could add, so in this example, the screenshot, we have the title as our first level 1 bookmark, and then we have created kind of level 2 bookmarks underneath for all the front matter in the textbook. And we've done that by dragging those bookmarks up and under the level 1 title bookmark. And then I have chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, even though the chapter 1 colon doesn't appear in the actual on the page of the PDF, I've added it in to make it easier for someone to see and discern the organizational structure. So some accessible design choices, and this is where I'm going to have to kind of be brief because this could be its own 1-hour training all by itself. But you want to think about font size being as large as possible. Sans serif fonts are the best. Those are the more plain. They don't have lots of doodads or details. There's not like little bendy curves or flourishes on the letters. So plain fonts are best for accessibility. Avoid large amounts of italicized, bold, underlined, or capitalized text whenever possible. That doesn't mean you have to avoid it entirely, but a whole paragraph of capitalized text, not only do you feel shouted at, but it's hard for someone cognitively to read that easily. We read by recognizing phonemes, which are word shapes, and so if you capitalize something or you make it bold or you italicize it, you're changing the shape of that word. So someone has to do a little bit of extra mental gymnastics to figure out what they're reading. Do not rely on color coding alone to convey meaning. So please remember that some people can't tell different colors apart. So if you are using color coding, make sure you have a backup way of indicating that meaning. Color contrast should reduce eye strain, so white and black are very different from one another. That's the default color contrast. Black background and yellow font is supposed to be the most accessible, so that's great for us Georgia Tech folk. It reduces glare. The black background reduces glare, and it's supposed to be the most pleasing color combination, if you believe that or not. But lots of accessibility studies show that it is true. And then, of course, if you must use graphics, try to include a caption and or alt text description. So some specifics. Now we're going to move from the general into more specific programs and more specific types of documents. So for PowerPoints, you want to make sure, of course, that you're using very descriptive titles for each slide, and you want to make sure that each title is unique. It will run, if you run the accessibility checker with PowerPoint and you have 4 slides titled Introduction, it will flag that as an error. And so I see also a lot of times people will put introduction part 1, introduction part 2, introduction part 3, introduction part 4. And I would advocate that best practice is to make all of your slide titles as unique as possible. It will help someone going back figure out what your argument was on that particular slide. It will help them go back and find information they need. It definitely helps me when I'm editing a slide deck to figure out what's the purpose of this slide again? Oh yeah, PowerPoint layouts. So the more descriptive you could be while not writing a novel in the title pane, the better it's going to be in terms of accessibility. It also helps you focus and figure out what you're doing in your own presentation and reminds you where you are in your presentation, where you're going, much better than part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. It's a little less descriptive. Another thing about PowerPoint in terms of accessibility is what this screenshot is all about, and that is choosing the accessible built-in templates and layouts that PowerPoint has for you. Inserting a text box was how I was taught to use PowerPoint back in the day, in my first job. And this is a far more accessible way to do things, is to use the built-in templates. If you do insert a text box, I would say about 50% of the time, based on my experience, the screen reader can read that text box. 50% it skips it entirely. So inserting a text box, you just have to chance it. It might not get read. It might, that text box that you right click and insert, it might not be accessible to the screen reading program. So using the accessible placeholders in this layout pane, they will always be read if you insert readable text, not just a picture of text. So in order to do this, you'll go to the home ribbon, click on layout, and then you will see all of your different options. You can also go to the design tab to look at differently organized slides that might have more accessible content placeholders for you. You can also copy an accessible content placeholder and add another one onto your slide if necessary. There are all sorts of workarounds, but you definitely want to use the accessible layouts and not insert a text box. Okay, in terms of checking for accessibility, once you've done all this accessible work, you've described all your images, you've added headings or bookmarks for navigation, you've thought about your design and your layouts, then you want to use the accessibility checker as a backup. For both Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, they both use the same accessibility checker, and so the instructions are the same. You will go to the Review tab and select Check Accessibility. Now, if you don't have the most current, and again, that's just a few months, if you don't have the most current version of the Office suite, the accessibility checker in the older version of Office is located. You can get to it by clicking on the File tab and then click on Check for Issues and then select Check Accessibility. And it will run a report, and this screenshot on the right-hand side is an example of the report that it would generate. Sometimes that first bullet point that I've got up here mentions sometimes when you try to run the accessibility report, it will ask you to save your doc file or PowerPoint with an X on the end of the extension, and that's fine. It will not change your formatting, but it updates the file version so that the accessibility checker can find everything. Once you run the checker, it opens up again on the right-hand side of your Microsoft Word or PowerPoint presentation, and it will list all of the errors and warnings and tips in separate categories. The goal of document accessibility is not always to get a 100% clear report, and sometimes it's impossible to get a 100% clear report. You want to get it as close as possible. But for instance, I have done all of the accessibility checks on this PowerPoint that I'm presenting on today, that I'm using, and that I'll share with all of you after the meeting. But I still have warnings to check the reading order of objects on the slide. And I have checked them manually, but it still lingers on the accessibility report. So there are some things that you can't fix. Also, if you are working with someone's their PDF, and you're trying to make it accessible for them, you might not be able to change the color contrast in a completed PDF. And so sometimes you can't fix everything, but the goal is to fix whatever you can. So in this example, it's telling me that I'm missing alt text in my table, that I haven't specified a header row, that I have unclear hyperlinks, and many of these I can go ahead and fix. When I click on an individual warning or error, if you see down below, it provides additional information about why to fix it and how to fix it, which is very, very helpful. So you want to make sure that at least the errors and the warnings, those top two sections, you're addressing them, and if you don't know, if you can't fix something, you can at least speak to why it can't be fixed. That's the goal. In Adobe, the accessibility report is a little bit different. So in order to check PDF files for accessibility, you will open up the accessibility tools in Acrobat, and then you will click on full check. And this will generate a report similar to the one that we saw with Microsoft. This is the dialog box. This screenshot here shows you the dialog box of the accessibility checker options, and I just leave them all on so I get the full report. And it will then generate a report and help you find and correct errors, such as if you're missing alt text, or you don't have enough bookmarks, or if there's error with the color contrast, or you haven't selected a primary language in the document properties, and it will walk you through how to do that. So these built-in checkers are really great. They're helpful, and again, they have links to take you. If you click on the error, it will take you through the basics of how to fix it yourself. Okay, so it looks like we're right on time in terms of the presentation. I haven't gone too long, which is a first because I can talk. So I want to turn the last part of our presentation today to look at emails, email campaigns, and social media. And I've generated a few slides here that kind of go step by step through how to make sure that we are putting our best foot forward for all of our members. And the goal is that everything that is going out is accessible. So in terms of email, this is an everybody slide. This affects every single person on the CIDI team. And I would say it even branches out into personal email because it really is just best practice. It's good to, there's so many emails that I send out at work and then emails that I send out at home. And if I try to do very top of the line accessibility in one and not the other, I can fall into bad habits. So I try to make sure that I'm practicing this with my home email as well. So email accessibility, all images in an email should be described. So you can attach an image, and if you attach it, you'd want to describe the image or images in the body of the email. If you've inserted or embedded the image inside of an email in Outlook, then you would right-click on the image, click on Format Picture, same as you would with a Microsoft Word doc. Click the layout and properties icon, same exact steps, and you would enter that alt text. You would enter your brief image description. All attachments in an email should also be accessible. So if you've created that attachment, you want to make sure that it has headings and the images inside it are described, that it's easy to navigate, all of the things we talked about. And then also you want to make sure that they're named clearly. So sometimes I'll get an email and it'll have 5 bajillion attachments. They're all either named the exact same thing with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 after it, or they're named crazy things like edited on this date, redacted with this, and they're just very confusingly titled. So if you could name attachments in a very clear, concise way or very regular way, if you have lots of them, it's much easier for someone to find once they download it. Because as you know, when you try downloading an attachment, sometimes it goes places it just wants to go. It doesn't always end up on your desktop. So it might go to a temporary folder or a documents folder or an in progress folder, who knows, limbo folder. So make sure that whatever you name your document, it will be easy if someone tries to search for it. It also helps someone know what to expect when they click on it to open it, right? So if you attach a lot of things and one of them is only one of those attachments is relevant to someone in your audience, it helps that person identify, okay, this one pertains to me, these others might be for other viewers. Also, you want to make sure that videos have captions or transcripts. This is just a shout out while I'm talking about doing our best practice and putting our best foot forward and making sure that we are walking the walk and talking the talk, or vice versa, of accessibility. For eText, we also want to make sure that all of our videos have captions or transcripts if possible. If we include a link to a video in our email, if there's a different version that has captions, that would be an even better option than the uncaptioned version. Obviously, we can't control all of the videos and captions out there, but best practice. In terms of MailChimp email campaigns, MailChimp has an excellent resource page on accessibility in email marketing, and I'm going to imagine that that's because they shared a building with us for so long. They know that accessibility matters, but I've included a link here to their resource, and they have different instructions for best practices for email campaigns, and they are using descriptive subject lines, maintaining a logical structure, using headers, using color contrast, not hiding information in images, and there's a specific reason for that. So one is that if you're putting a lot of important content in an image, it's not equally accessible to everyone, no matter how wonderful, your alt text description. And another reason is that some people turn off images from their emails, right? They might choose plain text only email to limit their bandwidth, or for whatever reason, people just don't like images. It might make things easier on their server. So if you do have important information in images and it's only in the images, that's where you need a caption in text to describe it. So, or an alt text description, because they would get the alt text alternate if they had their images turned off or blocked. Using proper alt text for images, and then using meaningful link text. So above on this slide, I have a link for accessibility and email marketing. Behind that link is a really ugly URL address, the http:// blah, 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 blah. You want to avoid, whenever possible in a document or a presentation, you want to avoid having that URL spelled out unless you know the only way that someone is accessing this is on a print copy. So if I were to print out this presentation and give it to you, you wouldn't have a way to get to that link. You wouldn't know what the link address was. So often, what we would do is we would have the accessible link here with the proper wording, so it's not a hard to understand garbled URL address, and then in parentheses we would put the actual address. But since this is a virtual training and I'm going to be sending you all a digital copy that you could just click on the link, I didn't put it in here to make my slide less pretty. Okay, for Facebook accessibility, Facebook and Instagram are both very highly visual in terms of their content, because a lot of stuff is either a brief animation or a picture or a video, or includes a video, even if it's mainly text. And so both Facebook and Instagram are trying to make strides in using object recognition to attempt auto-generating alt text for simple images. So I tried this earlier today with an image of my cat, and it guessed right. And all it wrote for alt text was cat, which is not very descriptive, but adequate, I guess. And here's an example of an image that I use when I talk about how complex some of the images that we describe in eText can get. This is an image of the universe, starting with the Big Bang and then everything ever after. This is a very difficult to describe image, and the auto-generated alt text was left blank by Facebook, and I don't blame it. So if you want, I would say when you are posting on Facebook, especially on behalf of CIDI, or if you're sharing something from CIDI, you want to make sure all of the images are described, and that goes for stills of video images too. But it will auto-generate alt text for you. You want to try and get in the habit, if possible, of overriding the auto-generated alt text, because again, like what's happening with Microsoft Word, it's just not good enough yet. It hasn't gotten to that place where you could trust on it and it's reliable. So I would say best practice, always write your own descriptions. And in order to do that, before you post, you would write your post in Facebook like normal, hover over the thumbnail of the photo, click on the pencil icon, and you can edit it, and it will bring up a screen. And this is the screenshot of the screen where you can edit your photo and write in your own alt text description. On Instagram, it's very similar. You know, Facebook and Instagram are connected. So when posting to Instagram, again, to avoid that auto-generated alt text mess that might not be the greatest, you would click on Advanced Settings and then describe your image. And this screenshot shows you a new post that's just about ready to be posted. And then you can go into your advanced settings and you have this option of typing in a description. And you could also make your description the same as your caption if you want, or different, depending on whether you want to embed new information for people using screen reading technology. For Twitter, I could not test this one because somehow I have remained immune to Twitter. I've not been tempted into the Twitter sphere. So, but this was the instructional set that I found on their website. To add alt text to an image on Twitter, you click on the Tweet Compose button, you attach your photo, and then click Add Description, then click Done. And the good thing on all of these was that I saw that you could go back and add alt text after the fact. So if I were to compose a tweet and then it was done and then I went, oh no, I posted it. I don't want to erase all the likes by going back and reposting it or deleting my post. You can add it afterwards. After you've already posted it, you can edit the alt text. But Twitter said that you cannot add image description on videos, unfortunately. So in terms of further resources, we have created a staff resources page first on Playbook, but then we updated it and moved it over to Zendesk. And this link will take you there, and I'll also send it out when I send the recorded version of this training with the amended captions. And the staff resources page has more in-depth advice, and it's organized by document type. So there's a section on how do I make my Microsoft Word doc more accessible? What about a PowerPoint? How about a PDF? And there's also a lot of great information on there that we added and we got from Raminta about fair use of photos and videos, because we thought all that information kind of went together, right? Because it's how do we present these documents out from CIDI internally, externally out. And so all that information is on one Zendesk page that I'll send to you all. Also, I'll be sending out the recording of this training once we get it captioned. Please feel free to share it with your teams. And if there is some sort of specific follow-up training people are interested in, I'm happy to do it because we give these trainings, or I give these trainings a lot on document accessibility or image description, but I don't want to just start offering them and make myself unwelcome, right? I don't want to give you too much information. I also have a lot of training slides that go into more specifics about the different programs, but again, I think right now less is more, and I just wanted this to be kind of the beginning of a conversation on document accessibility, hopefully make it short and sweet and easy for people to digest and think about. And in the future, if you think of other things you'd like to learn more about, please reach out to me and let me know. And I will try and set up a time that works for everyone. So I want to be very cognizant of time. I want to thank you again, everyone, for joining me this afternoon. And I'm going to stop recording now. And if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat, and have a great rest of your week.